Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. A couple of years ago, a group of teachers from Vermont technical high schools wanted to stage a friendly competition to find out who had the sweetest maple program in the state. The teachers reached out to UVM Extension, and in 2019, the first Maple Career Development event was held at Shelburne Farms. Part competition, part career opportunity showcase, the Maple CDE was a success for students and teachers alike. This year's competition was held virtually, but the competition remained, what else? Grade A. In a minute, we'll hear from the overall winner of this year's competition. But first, I want to introduce Mark Izzellhart, the UVM Extension Maple Specialist, and Lynn Wolf, the Market Garden Assistant Manager at Shelburne Farms. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Lynn, the Maple Career Development event started off as part of your graduate work at UVM. So talk about that and how you've been able to continue this work at Shelburne Farms.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. A few years ago, I completed the Field Naturalist and Ecological Planning program at UVM. And in that program, students, for sort of their final project, they team up with a sponsoring organization to fulfill an identified need in the community. And as you said, Vermont technical high schools and career centers had already identified that they really needed more unified sugaring curriculum and resources that could be used throughout the state. I personally have lots of interest in sugaring, and while I was completing my graduate program, I also was working at Shelburne Farms, where I continue to work, and part of my job is as a sugar maker. So creating a project with sugaring curriculum perfectly aligned with the farm's educational mission, as well as my own personal interest in the goal of my graduate program. Shelburne Farms is also a great place to host the first Maple CDE because we had all the necessary infrastructure, like a sugar house and a working sugar bush, to create a really robust hands-on experience. So I proposed the project to Shelburne Farms and UVM Extension, and both organizations agreed to be my project sponsor, which allowed me to complete my graduate program.
It's awesome. And so how is this competition tied to similar career development events held in Vermont, like by the FFA, the Future Farmers of America? Is there a connection there?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a connection. So Future Farmers America, FFA, host a number of these career development events. I'm just going to refer to them as CDEs throughout the year. And they range in all sorts of subject areas, from forestry to tractor handling to dairy judging. And sort of the goal of all of these is not only for the students to showcase their knowledge and skill set, but also prepare them to build a career in whatever that field of study is. So every spring, FFA hosts a big spring convention where they have a number of these CDEs going on in a couple of days. And in 2019, it happened to be held at Shelburne Farms. So we were able to make that a great location and time to have the first ever Maple CDE, because before that, although maple is a big part of our economy in Vermont, in our history, there wasn't a CDE dedicated to that subject.
That's fabulous. And so, Mark, of course, there's more to making maple syrup than what goes on in the sugar house. What other careers are there in maple?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sugar makers have to wear lots of hats. There's forest manager, there's plumber, there's sap hauler, and there's always inventions that are happening. And you'll see that sugar makers are very inventive because it's a unique process, but they also are very generous with their knowledge. So you'll see a lot of sharing. We've seen a lot of sugar makers go on to invent individual items and start businesses around that. And there are careers out there. There are manufacturers in Vermont, like Leader Evaporator, and even smaller ones like the Vermont Evaporator Company. So someone who has an intimate knowledge of how all the different steps of turning sap into syrup are going to be really well positioned to take on their own sugaring operation or to hit the ground running with an established operation that's out there.
Great. And, you know, it's always wonderful to be at Chilburn Farms, but not possible this year. How did you adapt this year's CDE so it could be held virtually without losing that hands-on aspect of the competition?
Well, a lot of the questions were about the same. You know, we had general knowledge, tree ID, tree physiology, some maple math. A lot of those were unchanged, although we distributed the questions to the various schools and they did it remotely. A few of the syrup grading activities had to be done a little differently. Instead of actually having lined up hydrometers and hydrometer cups and syrup to grade, we took pictures of hydrometers floating at different levels and asked the students to solve the questions. And then we actually mailed them samples of syrup that the students had to taste and grade for flavor. So there was some interactive elements. A lot of it was done remotely, or was all done remotely. And then we also added, instead of a hands-on team project like we did at Shelburne Farms in 2019, where teams of students had to put their own tubing system together, a small tubing system, and show that it worked, we asked them to do a team video and try to describe some element of sugaring in a very concise way.
What a great idea. So let's meet the 2021 Maple CDE overall winner. Sam Coe is from North Country Career Center in Newport, Vermont. Across the Fence's Keith Silva talked to Sam about the competition and his family sugaring business.
We've been sugaring for about 12 to 13 years. And our family farm's name is Sunnyside Maples, and we have about 3,800 taps, and we make around 30 drums of syrup a year, of 40-gallon drums.
Have you been sugaring that whole time, 13 years, since you were a little kid?
I've always been like in the sugar house, but I've only been like doing woods work for the past 5 years or so.
Tell me about the sugar house at North Country Career Center. How many trees do you tap, and what's the rig like there?
We have about 250 taps here at the land lab, and we RO it here. And we have a 2x6 wood-fired evaporator.
What are the challenges and what are some of the advantages to using wood to make maple syrup?
At the land lab, we use wood because it's a more traditional way of sugaring. I like the wood compared to the oil because it's quiet. We usually refire about every 5 minutes, so you really got to stay on your toes.
Is that easy to do, to keep it running?
It's pretty easy because you're constantly making your rounds around the evaporator, checking everything, making sure everything's working. It's a full-time job when you're boiling.
Part of the Maple CDE that you did was grading. Tell me about grading and what are some of the things you're looking for when you're grading maple syrup?
So as far as grading, you want to look at the color and the clarity of the syrup. You fill up a sample jar with your syrup and you hold it up to a light, whichever color it's lighter than is the grade that it is.
And you're good at grading? You got a good eye?
Not as good as some, but better than most.
What are your plans once you're done at North Country Career Center?
I might not come back to the Career Center next year. I might do the VAST program at Vermont Technical College, majoring in manufacturing engineering. And if I don't do that this year, next year, I'll do that once I graduate high school.
What do you like about sugar making? What's the part of it you enjoy the most?
In previous years, I've not really liked the woods work as much, and I've kind of just liked the being in the sugar house and ROing and boiling, the processing of the sap. But this year I've gotten out into the woods a lot more, and I've really enjoyed that a lot. So I like every part of it. Every part of sugaring I enjoy.
Congratulations, Sam. You seem like a very deserving winner. We also want to recognize Sam's teacher, Sam Niall Jensen, who teaches forestry, agriculture, and water resources at North Country Career Center. Congratulations to both Sams. So today we're talking with Mark Izzellhart and Lynn Wolf, who helped run this event. Mark, you know, Sam is quite humble, but I like what he said about being better than most when it comes to grading syrup. Why is this skill so valuable to the maple industry?
Well, fundamentally, we're talking about a very pure product that has a high degree of value, and the quality associated with that is how it derives a lot of its value. And consumers expect a high quality product, and without proper grading, the consumer doesn't know what they're going to get. So it's not just color, it's flavor and density, and making sure that everything is absolutely top notch. So if Sam's goes on to make his own operation or to help in his family's operation, making sure that the best possible syrup goes in that container will ensure that you get repeat customers and that the venture is profitable long term.
Yeah, you need to get it right. And Lynn, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but are there plans to hold this event in person next year?
Yeah, we're definitely hoping to host it again in person next year. It was a really great hands-on event that I would like to see going for many years to come.
But are there things quickly that around having this virtual version of the Maple CDE that you might apply to the future?
Yeah, the benefit really is that it's accessible to everyone when it's virtual. And part of the goal of doing this event is to make it more accessible to students in Vermont and maybe even beyond Vermont someday. So we'll take aspects of the virtual event and apply it in the future.
Fantastic. And Mark, where can students and teachers go to learn more about next year's CDE and all things Maple in Vermont?
Sure. The best place to go is the UVM Extension Maple page, and you can see all the materials that Lynn developed for her project, and even some past Across the Fence episodes about this event. So feel free to do that, or reach out to me directly if they have specific questions about how to participate.
Awesome. Mark Izzellhart and Lynn Wolf, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining us Across the Fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.